I see a question here. If you could stand up and give us your name and your question, and please make it a brief question.
I'm a fellow at the CID. Given in the Latin American context, given the fiscal constraints that the region is all facing, I'll ask you a very concrete question. Is the problem for the community security a problem of budget, or is it a problem of allocation of the money that we already have to spend on public security?
So just for the Facebook audience, the question, and a good one, was in an environment of scarce resources, is the problem one of simply not enough resources, or is it how the resources are spent?
I think the answer to that is very simple, really. It's both. I think it is absolutely sure that we can spend what we're spending now much better. Okay? So we could be using our resources much better in a much more efficient way than we are right now. So I think that's, but that doesn't mean that the total amount of resources we should be spending might also be higher. So what I would say is, number one, improve the quality of your current spending, and then see whether you need more. That's what I would say. It's possible. It's quite likely, actually. The size of the state in Latin America is actually quite small for when you compare it to like Nordic countries or countries that have decided to provide significant public services. That takes resources, and so maybe we need more. It's possible.
So let me ask just so we can get to more questions. This is a question from Facebook, Daniel Meza. What will we do with the security apparatus when the insecurity is over? So what I take from that question is that maybe we make large investments in security and then crime goes down. What would happen after that? Would you draw down on the size of the sort of criminal justice footprint? Natalie, do you have any thoughts there?
Well, I think it's linked to the previous question. It's about are we spending the right amount or not? I believe we need more analysis in cost benefits in Latin America about all interventions. I come from Colombia, and we know there is a lot of programs going on that are crime prevention programs. We don't know if they are effective or not, but they continue running those programs. One of the specific examples that I can think of is based on the latest studies that we did and the cost of violence is, for example, how much we're spending in prisons. No? It seems that it's a huge share of the spending in the countries, but it's still, we're producing more criminals. So we have to learn more from the evidence that, for example, putting all people in jail is not necessary. We have to think about alternatives to justice. Before building more prisons, why don't you think if, a lot of people are on jail, but they are not prosecuted? So all the process is collapsed. So we have to start thinking about the whole thing before, putting more or throwing more money into the problem.
I think that's a great point. There's this incredible condition in many countries in Latin America where there's overwhelming impunity for the most serious crime. And the prisons are massively overcrowded, but with nonviolent drug offenders or people who are simply waiting for trial. And, one of my arguments in terms of using that capacity has been maybe we should, until the prisons are filled with violent offenders, maybe we should have a different process for these lower level nonviolent offenders. If not as a measure of morality or simply as a measure of resource and allocation and prioritization. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Fernando Caferata. I'm an MBA student at the Economist School and a former official of the Ministry of Security of my country. So we've been talking about the future of each institution. I would like the three panels to talk about the future of the field of security security and development. Each of them knows a lot about that. So what do you envision in the future? Like predictive policing is being used in many places. Is this possible, useful, desirable in Latin America? Are there other things in the future of this field that you envision as possible and useful and desirable?
Sure. For the Facebook audience, the question is, what's the future? What are some of the initiatives? He mentioned predictive policing. Looking forward for the field of security and development.
Well, I think that the future is riddled with technology. So one of the biggest pitfalls of doing intelligent security policy is data. So we have very bad data, mostly because, not only because our administrative procedures are not very good in many countries, but also because just people don't report many crimes that are actually affecting their lives significantly. So I think technology is going to help reduce that problem. And so, for example, the city of Bogota and the city of Medellin, and there was surprisingly an initiative in Venezuela also, but because of the very weak legitimacy of the government, it hasn't really taken off. They have implemented apps, like phone apps, where people can actually report crimes. You could do a formal report of a crime on your phone, or you could just anonymously report a crime. So what this should help us do is have much better and real-time or close to real-time information about the reality of crime, across the territories. This is just one simple example of how some things are changing. And there are many other developments. Like, can we not to mention things related to cybercrime and all of this other stuff. This is just like an entirely different level. But I think that basic technology is going to help resolve some of these issues. But of course, as Nathalie said before, we have to be careful that this is not just driven by technology and the fun of it, but it's actually useful for resolving the specific problems that we have.
We're almost out of time, so I just want to very briefly go to you, Natalie, then you, Marcella, and then I'm going to ask one final question, and we'll finish.
Okay. Well, the criminals are very creative, so we have to be too. So I believe, and I agree with Daniel, technology, the use of alternative source of data, I think will be something very important for the region. We cannot just stay saying that we don't have good data. We have to be creative in producing and having better diagnosis, being more careful in understanding the reality of crime. Again, we said it's geographically focused. The realities are really at the micro level. Unless we understand them, we cannot solve them. And I think all this technology, all this new data, actually we're doing something with alternative data from telephone to predict crime. So this type of initiatives will help a lot, but we have to really improve a lot of the generation analysis and capability to do this type of work in the region.
I would say ditto on both those answers.
Yeah.
Marcella?
No, I'd say ditto. The only thing I'd add is data, which will come more, I think, from citizens and the specificity. Because I think the more you're able to determine the specific crime, the cure is going to become a lot more tailored to that. And I think that's going to allow us to make progress in some of these topics.
Absolutely. So I want to ask, I want to finish with a selfish question. What role should academic institutions like this one be playing in these sort of critical issues in promoting peace and reducing violence, particularly in Latin America? And to be even more concrete, what could we here at CID be doing better to have more of an impact on this issue? So I'll start with you, Natalie, and we'll
Okay.
just go across.
Well, we believe that events like that add value to the discussion and also raise the level of the issue. And I think that is very important, and I really encourage that to continue this kind of conversation. But I think one of what's very important, and I think is something that we should learn as international organization working with academic institution, is how we help to, what I call that, the translation of this knowledge that we create, the academics create, that policymakers can use to make their policies. And I think creating that bridge, we will help them a lot. And on top of that, I think it's not only doing studies and fancy papers, but it's also how we can create the capability in the countries that they can do the same and be useful for their own country. So I will, moving forward, I think we should continue to work together, building bridges, but also capabilities.
Thank you. Daniel.
Well, I don't know. I think academic institutions should produce quality research. This is like the main calling, and obviously teaching is sort of central. So do we think that academic institutions should take it on as, like, now we want to influence policy? Well, then maybe, but I think that you have to be careful as to, what the balance is. I think that quality research that will allow a deep discussion, deep understanding of the processes that countries are going through, and I think that's key. So the institution is already doing that. Maybe like having more people researching on these issues, having more funding for stimulating more research on crime. I think that's important. Now, if you think about, okay, but that's fine, but we want to have more influence. We want to. I think that what would be most profitable would be to support the region in whatever way is available. Maybe partnering with organizations such as ours or other organizations or local governments, or in trying to promote a culture of learning in the public sector. I think that this is the key to not only the security problem. I think it's the key to many of our development problems, which have to do with provision of public services. And I think there are many ways in which an institution such as this could actually push that agenda seriously.
Thank you. Marcela.
So since we have been agreeing so much throughout the whole evening, I'm going to
Disagree.
end by disagreeing. No.
Yes.
No, just to make the point that I agree that rigorous evidence is and research is important, but I actually, and having been and studied here at the Kennedy School, I find that the Kennedy School and the CID is particularly well placed to create that linkage. And right, because there's not enough research out there. I mean, when we were looking at starting this initiative, and when I was at USAID, the literature on this topic is I mean, there's just not a lot of that has worked, to the point that we're using LA, Detroit, and using those models in Honduras, right? So there's a lot more that needs to be created in terms of evidence, but I think it's these places that can make them politically feasible, because if not, they will end up, as theoretical statements. And if anything, this kind of creating this network of practitioners around the region who are studying and who can share when they implement it in their context, see what's working, what's not, so that other police departments can try different things. Because as you know, with every randomized trial, it gives you a hint and some priors to experiment in your context. But I think we're not learning and experimenting fast enough, and I think bringing those people together in the region, within Latin America, would be a great initiative that could happen here, or at CAF, or at the IDB, that would be very valuable for all.
Well, with that, I just want to thank everyone for participating. Let's give our participants, our panelists, a big hand. Thank you all for coming and for participating in this this session and in the entire session. Some of our members have been here, I think, for all of our sessions. So thank you very much.